I'm Josh.
And I'm Sam. Welcome back to Star Wars Deep Digging. Let's just get on with it.
A blue man shimmered to life to their left, an incoming haul from Captain Andoram making him glow in miniature as he shouted frantically from his offices in the spaceport. What now? Bale stalked toward the end of the long table, wedging himself between two ministers huddling over the hull. Brea was there an instant later, leaning forward to speak clearly into the recording device. Andream, can you hear me? Is there news? Above, the captain sounded panicked. Can you see? Something is moving into position in orbit. We had no warning. What are you saying? You aren't making any sense, Brea replied, watching the call begin to fail. Something was interfering with the transmission. Captain? But Bale grabbed her by the wrist, turning to her slowly, his eyes searching the floor between them. Come, he whispered. Outside. Transfer the captain to my personal line. She let him lead her out of the hall and down the corridor at a run, and Brea picked up her skirts to keep pace, breath catching in her throat as he brought them sprinting toward the palace into the nearest balcony, the familiar outdoor haven off their chambers. They both skidded to a stop, Andoram springing to life in Bale's hands, as they stared up at the darkening sky. Get safety! The captain's voice was just a crackle now. Think, Bale. The Tantive goes down. Our communication's blocked. She sighed and watched as the image of the captain cut out entirely. They must know it was Leia. This is a retaliation.
This can only mean one thing. Invasion?
So, the interesting thing is, in Legends they actually did send out a distress signal, but it wasn't answered by their neighboring world, because, General Riken was like, oh, there's no way the Empire would actually do it. It's a bluff. Yeah, he regrets making that assumption. Speaking of which, her husband began to pace, sweat beating at his temples as he threw down the comm in frustration. Most of what he muttered to himself was too soft to be heard. Impossible. They wouldn't dare. There. Maybe this was all a distraction, some Imperial plot to keep them from searching for their daughter. Nothing was certain, she reminded herself. Nothing was to be believed until they had absolute confirmation.
Nothing is predestined!
Ooh, another shot, because that is a reference I did not get.
Oh, yeah.
And if the Empire's attention had turned to Alderaan, then all the better. Let them to be distracted here. It might allow her daughter to escape the wreck. As long as she survived, there was hope. No matter what far-flung planet Leia had landed on, she would find a way to deliver the data and complete her task. Alright, I'll shut up about the what ifs, but that's another good one where Leia and only Leia manages to make it to Tatooine. A shadow fell across the balcony, draping them both in cold and sudden darkness. She reached for Bale instinctively, looping her arm into his as they both turned in unison to face the valley. Brea shielded her eyes with the flat of her hand, gazing up at the sky and its massive object that moved slowly across the sun. In an instant, the thing had obscured the sun completely. What could be so large? Brea murmured. Fear nodded tight.
Wait, something has obscured the sun. Is it causing crops to die off? Or causing weather to be strange? If so, it's probably one of Zinj's orbital night cloaks.
Yeah, courtship of Princess Leia. We will get to that eventually, I promise. What could be so large? Brea murmured. Fear knotted tightly in her stomach, and she clung harder to her husband. What was she seeing? She had witnessed an eclipse once on Coruscant, but this was so much faster. So unnatural. Beside her, Bale gasped and then seemed to go limp. He turned to her, eyes empty, mouth moving, but silence. At last he found his voice and searched the ground at her feet. The planet killer. She fought back the surge of nausea that slammed into her like a breaking wave and placed her hands on his face, forcing Bale to look at her. It couldn't be true. Not Alderaan. They were the heart of the galaxy, a major planet, a bastion of tradition and peace and prosperity. The perfect symbol to destroy, the perfect message to send. No planet was too sacred, too populous. No planet was safe. My love, they wouldn't, she said, even as she knew they would. They clocked darkened immediately. Dancy Ween is too remote to make an effective demonstration and all that. Neil smoothed his hands over hers and touched their foreheads together. At least we will be together. No, she refused to believe it. How could such evil exist? There must be time. The spaceport is too far, but we could reach our private shuttle. We could evacuate as many as possible. There must...
How can such evil exist? Have you never heard of the Sith?
Well, I mean, they don't exactly have a monopoly on evil, but yeah, I get what you're saying. There must be time. The spaceport is too far, but we could reach our private shuttle. We could evacuate as many as possible. There must be something. Anything that we can... The sound was incredible. They turned toward it, nodded in awe and dread. A deadening of air that pulled all noise from around them like a tremendous blast like lightning rent the air. Bale yanked her into his arms, squeezing her as light blinded them. A ring of white that grew from the horizon, spreading fast, bringing trees, beasts, and rocks with it. She made it out. I'm pretty sure the Death Star blew up Alderaan instantly, but I guess it took a few seconds. Rhea whispered. Trembling hands balled in his cloak, her disbelieving eyes watching as the planet itself burst with 1,000 bright, terrible geysers. I would know if she was gone, Bale. She lives. He kissed her forehead, leaving his lips there as the palace shook under them, and the beams holding the balcony aloft screamed and gave. The attendants inside their apartments gave a wail of fright, and the castle sagged with no ground left beneath it. Her bones hurt, felt as if they were being shaken apart. She lives, Bale said once more. Brea closed her eyes. I know. The mountains rose up, folding toward them, swallowing them whole. She felt her husband's warmth, his breath on her neck, then the scent of ash and smoke, and in the next moment, oblivion. Verge of Greatness by Pablo Hidalgo. Then, you may fire when ready. Well, if Tarkin was not the type to have rehearsed words. He was not given to standing before a mirror and imagining his moments of triumph, mouthing or whispering statements that would become cemented in history. But these words were different. And, it's funny because Tarkin is actually a rather quotable character. He had waited over 2 decades to say them. Wait, he was waiting while the Clone Wars were still going on? Creepy. These words would begin an unfathomable frenzy of actions and reactions deep within the enormous weapon he stood in control of, and unleash a torrent of primordial fire that would erase the enemies of the Empire in a searing instant. It pricked him that Director Krennic had already given the order to fire a test shot that had vaporized Jedha City, but such precautions were necessary. What if it had failed? Better such embarrassment lie at the feet of Orson Krennic than Grand Moff Tarkin. Krennic's test proved spectacular, but the good director was destined to receive only a footnote mention in the annals of the Empire as being tangentially connected to a mining disaster on the ancient moon. Ah, man, the Death Star is such a good idea. Glad I thought of it. Tarkin had carefully modulated his own distance from the project over the years, hovering ever closer when signs pointed.
Krennic actually stole my idea for the Death Star. And actually, Krennic and Lemlesk both stole my idea for the Death Star. I had the perfect idea for what the Death Star could be, a nut opener. But they took it and used it and turned it into a planet killer.
Honestly, it would be great to see, read a fanfic where Duvich were to hang out with the rest of them. Imagine him running into Quizux. Oh, comedy gold. Hovering ever closer when signs pointed to success, floating farther away when delays gnawed at the Emperor's patience. In that moment over Jeddah, the Death Star moved from concept to proof, and Tarkin had stepped from distant backer to chief architect. Krennic had tried to steal that moment. What was it he had said? That they stood there amid his achievement? Nonsense. Such claims were as absurd as a bricklayer taking pride in a parapet built at the behest of a king. It is the king's castle. Glory ascends ever skyward. Oh. Tarkin is one of those guys. It's giving Nathaniel Northwest from Gravity Falls.
Mm.
Now Tarkin stood atop the sky, looking down at Scarif, a world violated by rebel intruders, a world infested, its secrets, imperial secrets, exposed to rebel vermin. So if it were like Hutt secrets exposed to rebel vermin, he wouldn't be bothered? Just saying. These secrets were not irreplaceable. They were duplicates of the military development records on Coruscant, and knowing the Emperor elsewhere. That was beside the point. The rebel threat was here and now. The matter called for an executive decision. The rebels could not leave Scarif. The information...
Where did Tarkin keep a copy of his records? In his Grand Moffus?
Okay, that's a good one. The information needed to be purged, as a limb needed to be amputated before the inspection spread elsewhere. You know, that's actually a common misconception. Blood gets pumped through the body so fast that severing a limb isn't going to help. Not that it doesn't make for a better story, especially where, like, zombie stuff is concerned.
Oh yeah, speaking of that, I need to do a blood transfusion for a cyborg. Well, I need to take out my perfect blood transfusion subjects and pump his blood into a cyborg.
You do realize that's not how midi-chlorians work, right?
I didn't say it was going to be force sensitive.
Oh, then what do you need the blood for?
To keep him alive so he can lead the droid armies.
Can't you just make him a cyborg body that doesn't need blood?
I don't... You probably could have told me that before I blew up his ship.
Yeah. Well, hindsight is 20/20. And Krennic was down there, wasn't he? Returned to the Citadel on Scarif to clean up the mess he'd started. Well, Tarkin could do him a favor and sterilize that mess far more effectively from his current vantage point. Inside the Death Star, a star orbiting high above the tropical planets. Scarif turned below, bringing the Citadel to the horizon. You may fire when ready, Tarkin said at long last, and he allowed himself the briefest of smiles. Now, Tarkin stood on the overbridge of the Death Star, surrounded by luminescent instrumentation and humming machinery. General Tagg waited nearby, as did Admiral Motti, examining a readout display through a glance that failed to notice these officers could be forgiven. Though a glance that failed to notice these officers could be forgiven, what with the other presence on the floor, the imposing form of Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. Ah, yeah, like when you're watching the movie, your focus is only on Vader. You don't notice the other guys in the background. Her resistance to the mind probe is considerable. It'll be some time before we can extract any information from her, rumbled Vader, describing the tenacity of their prisoner, Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan. Time. The word echoed in Tarkin's mind, bringing up thoughts of the past again. You have made Time an ally of the rebellion. Tarkin had scolded that idiot Krennic over such matters. The final checkout is completed, Motti beamed. The Admiral took care to ensure that Tarkin stood directly between him and the capricious Dark Lord. Motti and Vader had a recent disagreement on matters of spirituality and procedure.
Time and youth. Two of the greatest, most valuable things in the galaxy credits can't buy. Probably said by Cronal.
I mean, technically they could. Like, if you buy the whole human replica droids plus Intekmans equals immortality thing, technically you're buying both youth and time with that.
Oh, right, I forgot dark side force users crave immortality.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that no one ever thought of that. I mean, there's probably a reason why it doesn't work, but it's weird that they never explained why it doesn't work. All systems are operational. What course shall we set? An operational Death Star in the entire galaxy within reach. A moment 2 decades in the making. And yet Tarkin could not savor it. The questions buzzed at him like a gnat in a bedroom. Where were these rebels? Where were they operating from? Where was their base? And the most stinging question, what good was having the most powerful weapon in the universe if this girl could defy them? Perhaps she would respond to an alternative form of persuasion. He proposed. The Senate in its appeals to the populace were no more. The Emperor had seen to that with the long overdue dissolution of that quarrelsome body.
Oh yeah, I also thought of this. If there was a huge mining accident when constructing the Death Star, Tarkin could have said, "What good is firing the greatest, most powerful, most feared weapon in the galaxy if we're not alive to see it?"
Yeah. Ooh, speaking of which, we should definitely read the Death Star novel.
Oh, yeah.
The Senate in its appeals to the populace were no more. The Emperor had seen to that with the long overdue dissolution of that quarrelsome body. Planets that brooked treason but were afforded some protection by invoking the sympathies of the Empire's citizens would have no voice to appeal to the people. These worlds needed a reminder of what ultimate power looked like. "What do you mean?" asked Vader. Though no doubt the Dark Lord already suspected the eventual destination of Tarkin's train of thought. "I think it is time we demonstrated the full power of this station," said Tarkin. He turned to the young Admiral. "Set your course for Alderaan." Marty grinned. "With pleasure." You know, and I'd said Marty's kinda a sick bastard too. The Death Star's jump to hyperspace occurred with little incident. It was literally no small matter to propel such a massive object at superluminal velocities, but the marvel of engineering that was this battle station performed to expectation. Only slight shudders could be felt in Tarkin's spacious office, where they resonated in rings in a cup of water on the gleaming surface of his desk. Well, okay, they do have the problem where they can't do in-system jumps, which is what ultimately led to their demise, but yep, it makes sense because of how big the Death Star is. Tarkin sat looking over engineering reports scrolling across the desk monitor. Per Krennic standards, each hyperspace jump was accompanied by an exhaustive list chronicling the performance of every system and subsystem involved in the process. Tarkin's bony fingers flicked a scroll of information, but he soon grew disinterested. The station worked. He didn't need an autopsy on every mechanical event. Let the engineers pour through it. He shuffled the tactical data feed out of view and pulled up the news coming out of the Capitol. The disbanding of the Senate and it demanded the attention of the media, and the whole news outlets were obediently repeating the narrative that the Empire's advisors had prepared. Rebel traitors had infiltrated the Senate. Such infiltration resulted in a devastating terrorist strike on a major Imperial military installation on Scarif. For the duration of the emergency, the Emperor needed absolute control to bring a swift end to the threat and root out insurgents who had access to the heart of the Imperial bureaucracy. Which is a nice parallel with the radio drama, though they are the... And, the excuse that rebels infiltrated the Senate is a pretty good one, especially since that is exactly what the rebels would do if they were able to gain enough sympathy among the Senate. Tarkin saw a dramatic display of the Death Star's prime weapon as the perfect way to punctuate that decree with an undeniable example of Imperial power. Tarkin had the authority to make such decisions. Surely he did not seek permission from Coruscant to do what he plans. Ooh, careful there. We all know how old Sheevy gets when he's, not listened to. Okay, not my best work.
Let's just say, if Tarkin tries to overstep his bounds on Coruscant, Palpatine will say, now that I think about it, this is not the first time you proved to be clumsy, Grand Moff Tarkin.
You know the penalty for failure. The door chime rang, interrupting Tarkin's reading. From his desk, he unsealed the door and invited the
Door chime? Maybe it's Dala.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, now we definitely need to get to the Death Star novel. It's the only one in which Dala is tolerable. From his desk, he unsealed the door and invited his visitor to enter. Marty stepped forward. "I wish to congratulate you, Governor, on a more personal level than formality would ordinarily allow. You have achieved what many non-believers deemed would be impossible," he said. Marty's nostrils flared as he breathed deeply. "The Death Star is ready and is yours." Oh, we're getting to a scene from the radio drama. Your sentiment is noted and appreciated, Monty, but I'm not one to have time wasted on overly emotional displays. Said Tarkin, watching the Admiral closely. You did not come here just to share such words. Monty swallowed, then spoke. Sir, if I may, this station can destroy any planet you care to select. The entire Starfleet in pitched battle couldn't stop us. Couldn't stop you. You now have in your hand the power of life and death over every living thing in the galaxy. You know, I'm fairly certain the entire Starfleet could stop them. Like, people tend to forget how big the Imperial fleet really is. Tarkin waited, saying nothing. Monty continued. Ultimate power. It rests with you now. And with the Emperor, of course, said Tarkin, spearing Monty with his gaze. To be sure, Governor, Monty quickly replied. That's what I meant. But the Emperor is far from here, and you are in actual command. Tarkin reached for his water, but still watched Monty closely. This isn't the first time you've spoken in this fashion, Monty. He took a brief sip. Say what is on your mind. If you order so. Monty's pause was almost imperceptible. The battle station has become the very source of the Empire's power. All that power lies at your command. And your command alone. You are close to treason, Monty, Tarkin warned. He had known that this conversation would arrive at this mark when Monty had shown himself in. Is it treason to point out that you could demand a position of authority, second only to that of the Emperor? Asked Monty. I would not care to have the Emperor as my enemy, Tarkin said, breaking eye contact with Monty to glance down at the reports from Coruscant. With a flick of the button, he collapsed that data feed. But command of the Death Star makes you his equal, said Monty. You could share dominion of the galaxy. The slight emphasis on share painted a clear picture of motivation in Tarkin's mind. He looked back up at Monty and grinned his lipless grin. With you at my right hand? I'm your willing servant, Governor Tarkin. Tarkin stood. Monty took an expectant half-step forward, but Tarkin stayed behind his desk. Thank you for the sentiment regarding this station's operation, Admiral. But we shall now return to the formality of procedure and record, and continue our mission that the Emperor has decreed. Yeah, Monty's a little in over his head. Palpatine could probably take down the Death Star himself.
Also, the Death Star is not the only thing that has power over life and death. What about the Celestials who created the galaxy? They have power over life and death.
Well, there are all manner of ways to resurrect someone. But we don't have time to get into all, 40 of them, I think, at this point. Well, okay, it's probably not that many. Maybe more like 20, but still, there's a lot. Monty nodded, regaining his more rigid posture and the degree of circumspection that Imperial protocols dictated, but the gleam was still in his eye. It had been a gamble, but Monty had successfully launched the first volley in an ambitious bid for power, and still stood possessed of his rank and his life. Tarkin dismissed him with a nod, and Monty turned on his heels and stepped out of the office. Oh yeah, Tarkin could very easily just...
Could this have been how Teradok and Harsk started out, before they became rival warlords?
Oh, that would be a fun story to read. Politics, thought Tarkin, was where Krennic failed. The loudmouth engineer knew the intricacies of hyperdrive and energy conversion ratios, but he had failed to see the pitfalls of the Imperial Court. Krennic had wanted to ascend, but was at a loss as to how to climb. Tarkin had blocked his every path, and not even a Death Star had allowed Krennic to rise. Krennic had been a builder pretending to be a leader. In the end, it was his undoing. You know, I never really got that vibe from Krennic. But then again, it's hard to get that vibe from any sort of Imperial. Maybe Lemelisk?
Definitely Lemelisk.
Tarkin stood on the overbridge. Admiral Monty had informed him of the safer version from hyperspace and that the Death Star now loomed closer to Alderaan. Tarkin had visited the world on many occasions. It was steeped in history, its royal family having launched many of the ancient expeditions that had first opened up the galaxy. Wait, I thought that was Kuat. Or was it Corellia? The lore's really inconsistent.
Could have been any of them, actually.
I know the Duros were big fans of colonizing. That's why Nemoidians are a thing. Such a pedigree elevated it to untouchable heights of importance, and a cloud of arrogance surrounded it. The Organas had thought they could act with impunity in defying the Emperor's decrees, because history had afforded them a special place in the hearts and minds of the people. Alderaan and its royals were overdue for a lesson. Governor Tarkin, said a haughty voice cloaked in an affected accent. Okay, so it is canonical that Leia temporarily has a different accent, trying that scene before going back to her normal accents. That is canon. I should have expected to find you holding Vader's leash. I recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board. Despite her small frame, entirely overshadowed by the oppressive black form of Darth Vader, Princess Leia Organa stood straight and proud. She was a fraction of Tarkin's height and age, but she stood her ground well as they exchanged barbs dressed as pleasantries. But Tarkin soon grew weary of the interchange. Princess Leia, he said, before your execution, I would like you to be my guest at a ceremony that will make this battle station operational. Tarkin spread his arms, taking in the sweep of the Death Star. No star system will dare oppose the Emperor now. Leia faced him and spoke evenly. The more you tighten your grip, Tarkin, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. Not after we demonstrate the power of this station. In a way, you have determined the choice of the planets that will be destroyed first, Tarkin said. He turned to the overbridge monitor that displayed the image of blue-green Alderaan. Aren't most planets blue-green? Yavin 4 is, and that's a moon. So very much like Scarif when he last stood in control of the Death Star's prime weapon, another blue-green one. Except now, there would be no half measures in the battle station's operation. Since you are reluctant to provide us with the location of the rebel base, I have chosen to test this station's destructive power on your home planet of Alderaan, he said. Leia gasped. There it was, the crack in the facade, the crumbling of hope, the death of that rebellious spark. Leia pleaded. Tarkin savored it. Vader was as impassive and unreadable as ever. Yeah, he tends to do that. Helps when you got a mask. It was different this time. The blast that emanated from the battle station's super laser, the 8 tributary beams funneled into a single ray that reduced Alderaan into fiery rubble. Tens of thousands of years of history were wiped out in an instant. Oh, yeah. It's weird to go back and play, SWTOR, for instance, knowing all of it's going to be gone one day. But, hey, fun while it lasted. Tarkin saw his future in the bright shockwave of fire that radiated into the cosmos. Okay, the ring from the special edition is canon, too. He thought of the distant Emperor and how little Palpatine's reaction would matter. He thought of the girl sobbing at the destruction of her treasonous world. He thought of Muddy's word. And at this moment of triumph, Tarkin couldn't help but think of Krennic, and all he had taken from the unworthy man. Then, his shoulder burned, charred flesh cracked with every move. Orson Krennic's consciousness swam up from the pain-induced darkness. His senses focused the blurry sunlight into a comprehensible image. He was on Scarif, in the grip of what could only be described as a nightmare. But it was no dream. It was all true. And it had just gotten worse. Krennic looked skyward and saw his creation, the Death Star, looming beyond the clouds, revolving slowly. Tarkin, Krennic fumed. Tarkin was now in control of his battle station. Or so Tarkin thought. You do not know the power you stand upon, Tarkin. You don't know how to tame this. If the rebels had succeeded in stealing the tactical readouts of the battle station, then Krennic's immediate course of actions would have been to order a complete review of the schematics. Yeah, that would have been the smart thing to do. Now aware of Galen Erso's treachery, that's how he would have known. Yeah, if Krennic had bothered to let anyone know about that, such is the whims of the Force and all that. Krennic would have combed through the data to find anything, any aberration, no matter how insignificant. He would plug any gap that Erso might have made in the Death Star's armor. Krennic would do so, even though some would scoff that the Death Star was a proven success. Krennic would pull the station offline to examine every bolt. Krennic would have weathered the political fault of depriving the Emperor of his new weapon to ensure it worked flawlessly. Because he probably would have been executed for that, but it would have been the pragmatic thing to do. Because Krennic was an engineer. Tarkin was not. Tarkin could not fathom the complexity of this creation. Tarkin would instead be consumed by impatience. Tarkin was a politician pretending to be an architect. In the end, Krennic knew it would prove his undoing. My creation will be your destruction. And with a flash of green energy funneled through an array of composite kyber crystals engineered by Galen Erso, whose daughter just moments ago he had caught trespassing in the very heart of Imperial secrets, Orson Krennic became dust. Insert hoist by his own petard. Joke here. Far Too Remote by Jeffrey Brown. Yep. You get it? Meanwhile, on Dantooine, something tells me they aren't really here. The Trigger by Kieran Gill. Maybe Aphra didn't look like a rebel. Maybe she wasn't going to get shot. Okay. Now, we have to talk about our good friend Dr. Chelly Lona Aphra. Oh my.
She was here?
Yep. For those not in the know, Dr. Aphra is like evil Han Solo. She thinks herself a lovable rogue, when in reality she is just pretentiously cynical.
Well, I wouldn't say evil Han Solo, because that persona is already taken.
Oh, come on. Thraken is not evil Han Solo. He's just an evil guy who happens to look like Han Solo.
Oh. Well. Yeah, he is.
Like, in order to be the evil version of something, you gotta be their counterpart in personality as well. As she tumbled through the undergrowth, the vicious Dantooine thorns tearing at her, she remembered that all she had were prejudices of what rebels actually looked like. She pictured them having jutting chins, chests swollen with pride, and heads slightly creaking with a surfeit of misplaced idealism. That wasn't Aphra. That said, with dual blasters at the hip, goggles perched on her tatty pilot's helmet, and a wiry build, she looked more like a successful scavenger or an unsuccessful criminal than a doctor of archaeology. It'd be best to keep her head down, get back to the Archangel, and get the hell off this dumb green planet before she crossed paths with one of the Imperial patrols. Didn't matter what she looked like. They found her near this rebel base, they'd be suspicious. Inevitably in that murderously suspicious way the Empire was so fond of. Aphra's life alternated between finding interesting ancient artifacts and reactivating interesting ancient artifacts.
I just thought about this. This rebel base, does it look like a flat building with a few spikes popping out of each end, and has a garden that looks like it ran out of water and was covered in dust years ago?
Well, according to Galaxies.
The Jedi Enclave.
Yep. With brief interstitial periods of selling the interesting ancient artifacts. She liked to describe herself as a rogue archaeologist. Others tend to describe her as a weapons dealer. After spending the best years of her 20s doing so, she couldn't in good faith argue that hard against that. I mean, the difference between an ancient artifact and a weapon is... there's not much. She had been holed up in DN2 town, trying to reactivate and upgrade some war surplus droidicas. Oh yeah, there are a lot of war surplus droidicas. Do you think she's upgrading them in the Survivor's Quest kind of way? Oh wait, did you read that book?
No. Wait, Survivor's Quest. Oh, that droidica.
Yeah, that droidica. Also, Dan2 Town. I don't remember that one from KOTOR, or KOTOR 2, or SWOTOR, or literally any of the other times Dantooine has been visited in any media ever. But then again, big planet. Having the deflection fields integrate with the newly added rocket pods was nightmarish. Her first experiment led to the payload detonating on the inside of the field. Well, sounds like the droidica from Hunters. Aphra spending 2 weeks rebuilding the droids from scratch. She could solve the problem easily enough if she had a 3.23 collocoidic pulse field modulator. Colloquoid, you say?
So how does one become a colloquoid?
Classic. None of her usual contacts had one, so she looked for salvage. She thought she had a lead. This base on the far side of Dantooine had been secret enough not to draw attention to himself, but big enough that it couldn't be hidden from anyone actually looking. Aphra hacked into an orbital station's feed, which let her track the regular secretive movement of snub fighters into orbit and back. Okay, I stand corrected. There is at least one time outside of A New Hope in which the term snub fighter has been used. She presumed it was criminals or criminals with delusions of altruism, as in rebels. But it had been quiet for a while now, probably abandoned, possibly salvage rich. Delusions of altruism. This is what I'm talking about. Pretentiously cynical. The base itself was elegantly integrated with Dantooine's endless tree canopy. From orbit, you'd likely think it was a larger example of one of the planet's many sap forms. It had taken expert eye to notice the little snub fighters bay in a circle around a low main bunker. In her circle, you say? In her time picking out the sprawl, Aphra had learned a couple of things. Firstly, it was definitely a rebel base. Secondly, rebels were worryingly efficient in cleaning up after themselves. She felt sure actual criminals would have left more of a useful mess. Curse the rebellion. Reminds me of the Battlefront 2, they were organized line. Aphra had complicated feelings toward the rebellion. Their instincts were good, but good wasn't good enough. People like the rebels, all bright-hearted and high-minded, led to the Galactic Civil War. As far as Aphra had an ethical orientation, had been formed by growing up in the shadow of the war. Most people needed order. Better the Empire when the alternative was that. Weak people died in their billions in the alternative. I mean, the Empire's kill count is in the billions. I mean, it's kind of hard to play devil's advocate for the people who's like, okay, what's the best way for me to solve this problem? Oh, I know, genocide. Not that Aphra needed anyone, of course. She was working her way through what she was pretty sure was the central comm before it had been stripped when the Archangel sent her an alert. A flyby of TIE fighters had triggered her alerts. Wonder if Thane Kyrell's flying one. She had just enough time to run from the compound and throw herself into the wild undergrowth. Then the drop pods crashed down, claiming stormtrooper kill teams spreading across the base like insects. ODST. Research.
Thane Kyrell? Yeah, I know him, but wonder if Tycho Selchu's his wingman.
Yeah, that is weird. When did Tycho defect? I don't think he was on the Death Star. She almost burst through the undergrowth into the open when she saw the camouflage curve of her pocket cruiser's unusually towering curved nose peeking beneath the hull webbing she'd left to conceal it. Aphra had made it to safety. A second later, she realized that she hadn't. Working their way unknowingly toward the Archangel were 3 stormtroopers making a perimeter sweep. It was an obvious problem for her. It was also a problem for them, in that they were about to hit the layer of micromines she'd left to cover her approach. A moral dilemma, or as Aphra preferred to think of them, dilemmas. Moral never really came into it. Alright, I know it's just a me problem, and literally no one else cares because Aphra's a fan favorite and everyone loves her. So I'll stop going on about the pretentiousness, but seriously. Option 1. She lets them hit the mines. She finishes anyone left with their blasters. She gets the Archangel into orbit, trying to dodge the inevitable Star Destroyer that brought all these troopers here. She almost certainly has to abandon the droideka hull she's left in Dan 2 down, and has to burn through another transporter identity on the Archangel. Oh, and she murders a bunch of people too. Having read the comics, murder doesn't usually seem to be that big of an issue for her. Different writers, I guess. Alternatively, Aphra sighed, holstered her blaster, and stepped forward, hands raised, smiling. Hey guys, she shouted. How can I help you find gentlemen of the Imperial Army? Plus, those mines were expensive. She wasn't going to waste them on stormtroopers. Wonder what she was planning on using them for. Also, technically, the Stormtrooper Corps is separate from the Imperial Army in much the same way the Marine Corps is separate from the United States Army. But no one cares about the Army troopers anyway.
Actually, it's expressed on different Stormtrooper Corps in the Imperial Handbook.
Yep. The Stormtroopers questioned her, searched her, and dragged her toward the compounds. They found both blasters and the knife, but they left her with her tools, which was probably a mistake. they'd scanned her, they'd have found the explosive putty in the lining of her hat. Yeah, I always wondered why she wore that. She never used the goggles. If she could work out an excuse to remove her hat and play with the putty for a better part of a minute, that'd be useful. Maybe she could offer to show them clay animals? She was pushed into what was once the Rebels' HQ and was now the Imperials. Sports dad milled around, but Aphra knew they were irrelevant. The only man who mattered in the room stood, dressed in an Imperial uniform, looking at the hull maps of the area with a displeased expression. Aphra didn't read too much into that. Aphra suspected that good news or bad, that expression would sit there, glowering, perpetually disappointed. He was a gray cloud in a gray uniform. He was a general. Aphra couldn't interpret the string of colored buttons on his lapel, but he fulfilled every prejudice Aphra had of Imperial high command. Way to stereotype. He felt the gun still in the small of her back as the stormtrooper reported. Found her skulking around the outer perimeter, General Tag. That's the Tag one himself, said the stormtrooper in a surprisingly thin voice. She says she's from Dan-2 Town. Her speeder bike is heading east of the base. We're trying to locate it. The speeder didn't exist, but Aphra was damned if she was going to let anyone go poking around the Archangel.
So apparently these two knew each other before the Darth Vader comics.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised that never came up in their interactions. Did they interact? Probably not. Aphra beamed, both to try to make a good first impression, and because she correctly identified this Tag as a general. Her knowledge of military ranks at any time past the Republic was foggy at best. So she's familiar with Republic military ranks? That's interesting. I figured that would be too recent to be considered historical. I surrendered and handed over my weapons. I just want to help, she said with all the sincerity she could muster. Tag looked her over. He grunted, unconvinced, and turned back to the map. Why are you here? I'm stealing stuff. Well, salvaging, but I think I should get bonus marks for honesty, right? Aphra said. The base cleared down months ago, so I figured if there was anything left here, it was mine. Tag glanced back, analyzing her as if she were a spreadsheet, and he wanted to check if the columns tallied or not. I find you in the middle of an abandoned rebel base, and you claim you know nothing, he said. Aphra gave her best attempt at an innocent gasp. It perhaps reached the level of foul innocence. Surely not rebels, she said. The rebels are small and disorganized, barely more than bandits.
Hondo would be offended by this, saying, I am offended that you would accuse me of such piracy. But it is true.
Yep, definitely a Hondo line. This place could have held dozens of spaceships. Surely the rebels couldn't support a base like this. These new rebels were different. They were smart. They were organized. And they were everywhere. Tag's face was as motionless as the stormtrooper's mask. I think you're mistaking being clever for being smart, said Tag. Aphra winced a little. Getting shot for that would be dumb, even for her. I'm sorry, no one had any idea this was a rebel base. It's been abandoned for months by the time I got here. And she paused, searching for an angle that would allow her to continue her blessed, non-blaster wounded life. Aphra's life is definitely not blessed. This is the biggest military force Dantooine ever seen. Dantooine is quiet. Indoor lighting is a novelty. Show a force like this, and everyone from around here will know that no one could dream of resisting the Empire. Tag snorted, a single sharp noise. A laugh, or Tag's equivalent. I do not think there is any danger of the Empire's serious need being underestimated, he said. Today, Scavenger, the Empire destroyed Alderaan. The room was silent. Tag let the fact hang in the air, expecting silence to roll. It was immediately overthrown. How? Said Aphra. Surface bombing? Even with a fleet of Star Destroyers, that'd take weeks. Or a bioplague like on Genosha? Is this Arkan Initiative technology? She means Geonosis, right? Genosha it's an X-Men thing.
I think she meant Geonosis.
I've loved the work I've seen coming from the labs. Is it like a cities flattened thing or a leave the building standing thing? Are we talking about just sentience?
Also, the fact that Aphra's mentioning Geonosis is a callback to Ghost of Geonosis from Rebels Season 3.
Wait, wasn't it season... Oh, wait, no. Was this before Season 3? I need to check that. Are we talking... Or a full Flora Fauna extinction event? Seriously, how? Atmospheric ignition? I've seen plans for that.
Actually, it was before Season 3. They went to Geonosis during Season 3.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, mantle fissure. Magma core exposure can make a mess out of a civilization. Or, oh, I'm torturing myself. What do you mean exactly? Wait. Guess someone's read the Apocalypse How page on TV Tropes. Tarkin stared at her. I mean, the planet is dust, he said. Aphra was faintly aware that this was not the response Tag was expecting, but her excitement had its own momentum. Like dust? Like bits of asteroid and people floating in space? That? The Death Star destroyed Alderaan, said Tag, somehow being dragged along in the wake of the Aphra's enthusiasm. Wow, said Aphra. That's amazing. She was aware that she was being stared at. Well done, Empire, Aphra said. The awkward silence was broken when the other stormtroopers entered the room, saluting. Yeah, that's Aphra's main gimmick, being so utterly criffed up in the head that even the Empire doesn't really... There is no comprehension there. Sir, said the first, we've looked for your speeder and can't find it. Of course, said Aphra. I hid it. That's what hidden means. The silence returned. Aphra's Aphra routine had gone down better. Tag walked slowly up to her, arms behind his back, and considered her. Once more, Aphra's spreadsheet was tallied as Tag made his final analysis. I don't think you're a rebel, he said. Aphra tried not to laugh. She was going to live. I do think you're trouble, he said, and I suspect the world would be better off without you. Yeah, that's most people's reaction to Aphra. Oh no, she wasn't going to live. She was going to do the opposite of that. When Tag ordered the trooper to take her to the trees, execute her, and return to the search, Aphra had to fight every urge in her body not to run and kick and lash out. Also, not a smart thing to do. You shoot her, you make sure to shoot her while there are plenty of stormtroopers around, and then you take the body out there. It's less efficient, but it has a better chance of actually working. Her face twisted. If she ran now, she would be shot.
Yeah. If you're going to execute her, put her under a guard of triple the amount of stormtroopers you currently have right now. Do not underestimate this archaeologist.
If she fought, she'd be dragged out by a mob. Instead, she complied, and the stormtrooper guided her. Every step, she looked for her opening. There had to be something. Her luck got her into this kind of situation. Her luck got her out of it. That was how it worked. A voice nice inside her added a taunting, that's how it works until it doesn't. Well, don't worry, Aphra. You're a fan favorite. You've got a long future ahead of you. In fact, it's still going. Comics with her just came out. She winced. She knew it would eventually be it. Maybe this would be it. So, is this the first time you've executed someone? She asked, voice breaking. Don't speak, prisoner, said the trooper. His voice was unsteady, too. Okay, Aphra could work with that. Aphra laughed nervously, glancing slowly over her shoulder and winked. Or what are you going to do? Shoot me? They carried on toward the tree line. Aphra, a model of compliance. Were you aboard the Death Star? She asked. After a pause, he replied, You are very interested in planetary destruction. Who wouldn't be, she said, stepping over a log while considering whether she could make a break for the cover of the next trunk. It's weird no one ever actually uses the term mundicide. Like, it's right there. No, she couldn't. Not unless she wanted to do it with a 5-centimeter hole in her neck. I'm pretty sure the holes tend to be bigger than that. It's a weapon like that, and you're excited by it? He said, it just makes you think. How do you even design something like that? She said before glancing back to check the distance. Could she rush him? Unlikely going on now. Even if she did, he had about half a meter on her. I mean, do you think the Death Star had a trigger? She said, someone ordered it to be fired, but that's easy. Did someone actually have to pull the trigger? 10 granite, anyone? She carried on into the wood. He followed the 2 deadly steps behind her. I'll bet there wasn't. I bet it's a bunch of people, so everyone can have some undeniability responsibility. 6 engineers all charging up firing chambers, and it's only when they're powered up the weapon engages. That's how I do it, because someone has the weight of knowing they killed a whole planet on them. That could break them. They could just not press the buttons. And Tarkin would throw them out an airlock like you did to Andale Frant. That's how they do firing squads on some worlds, she went on, glancing back. There's someone whose gun isn't firing for real, so they can always think, hey, maybe I didn't do it. It's those little illusions that get us through. It's hardest when you've got no way to self-deceive. Or when you've got, no psychological capacity to feel guilt for causing massive amounts of death and destruction, which is how the Empire gets by. You're doing this solo. You're as unlucky as I am, she continued. Well, nearly as unlucky. Aphra turned around and stopped. You ever shot anyone in cold blood? Turn around, he ordered. Hey, I'm trying to help. I want to make this easy for you. This is going to sit inside you forever. If I'm going to die, I want to really think about this. Imagine actually killing Alderaan. Alderaan of all places. Alderaan is nice. Who'd blow up Alderaan? Hell of a place. Incredible history. Good party town. Hell, even had great sunsets. Now it doesn't even have a sky. Okay, I've seen Alderaan. That place a party town? No. At least not the kind of parties Aphra would get invited to. Aphra took a slow step toward him, holding his gaze. And you're here with a gun pointing at some chatty lady, and you're always going to remember this day. In half a step, pulling the tool from her waistband, trying to remember the coat she needed. People are going to ask us all where we were today. Where were you when Alderaan died? And you're going to say, that's the day I went for a walk into some beautiful woods on Tatooine and shot that weird innocent scavenger lady. I mean, is it the same day? Could have been a while. How do time zones even work when you take multiple planets into account? Aphra almost dropped the tool and tried not to twist her face in anger. Don't mess up now, Aphra. If you're feeling philosophical, you'll say and add something like, she smiles, all innocents died that day. And people will nod and know that just because you did this really bad thing, it doesn't make you a bad person. Aphra reached out with her hand, activating the tool. Lights on, but silent. Her hand touched his, holding that eye contact, knowing if he looked down and saw her tool near his blaster, it would all be over. It's okay, she said. I forgive you. He pulled the trigger. A click. Aphra's knee went toward and not nearly on.
Here's a lesson for you stormtroopers. When it comes to facing a target, don't watch the mouth. Watch the hands.
Or just shoot first, ask questions later. Shoot a lot. You know you're going to miss the first few times. Aphra's knee went toward a not nearly armored enough groin. As he reeled, she pulled the blaster from his hand. You can always induce a jam with the Imperial model plate.
That reminds me, thousands of years ago, some girl kicked a guy wearing Mandalorian armor. She said, "Thou dang stupid armor." He said, "Not armored enough."
Yep. She pointed his own gun at him. Reboots after a couple of seconds. There was a low hum as the gun reactivated. You've never shot someone in cold blood, she said, gesturing the barrel at him. Guess who has? The stormtrooper stumbled, backing off, falling over a log, and then freezing, hands raised. He did all he could think of to do. No, please, he begged. Aphra shook her head. They train you to shoot. They train you to follow orders. They train you in, other things. Marching, I guess. But they don't train you in how to beg for your life. Maybe they should. That would probably help a lot. She said, take your helmet off. Aphra was expecting to have to repeat herself, but he pulled the helmet off instantly. They did have the following orders thing nailed down. He was about a decade younger than Aphra, not out of his teens yet. Nose too big, eyes blue and scared. She sighed. See, now you're a human. If you're begging for your life, you want people to know you're a living, breathing thing and not some weird enamel droid. It's easy to kill stormtroopers. Because of all that stuff about triggers I told you? Because all that stuff about triggers I just told you? She said. I don't think any of it's true. I think that the Death Star has a trigger, because I think it's easy to kill a planet. It's also abstract. It's why guys like Tag are fond of sending armies to their death while they order their troopers to take me out of sight and put a blast through my chest. A planet doesn't have a face. She said. It'd take a real monster to pull the trigger if Alderaan had a face. I mean, if you had the Force and you could sense all those lives and all those deaths, yeah, you'd have a problem with that.
Unless you have the Force and all you... unless, something about a KOTOR 2 reference.
Yeah, Force wounds. It's really weird that never came up again. His eyes moved between Aphra and the back of the gun barrel. Aphra had always defended the Empire as the best available choice, better than anarchy. Today the Empire had destroyed a planet, worse than a war's cost in an afternoon. She had no idea what to do with these feelings. Maybe when they had chilled, she could justify it. What's one planet if it cements a real peace? That sounds like the sort of logic she'd turn to. The needs justify the ends and all that. I mean, the problem with that way of thinking is that it assumes that the ends are actually achievable. In this case, they definitely are not. The galaxy will always be caught up in an endless cycle of death and destruction, and no amount of killing will ever permanently put a stop to it. Sad, but true. And insert inevitable flame war over how that relates to real life in the comments. Okay, let's move on. But right now, she just wished there could be a better empire and wished there was someone who could do that. The boy was crying, and Aphra felt shame and anger mix inside her. Her excitement was real. Her anger was real. It was all real, but it was clouded by the shame. Shame that she was right. She could have shot a stormtrooper. She wasn't going to shoot this boy with a wet face and terrified eyes. Okay, she said, starting to back into it. This is the deal. Put your helmet back on. Tell them you shot me. If they ask, tell them I begged, but they won't ask. Another death today isn't going to rape, right? She shot the blaster at the ground. He jumped back. That's your people thinking you've done your job, she said. Alderion's dead and Scavenger and Stormtrooper both live. Sound good? No. He nodded. She winked and then turned and ran, dropping the blaster where he could find it. Within 100 meters, she heard shouts. Within 200 meters, she heard the scream of the alarm. Within 5 meters, she was punching the Archangel into orbit. TIE fighters on her aft, engines screaming, seeing the white deck of a Star Destroyer loom into view ahead of her. As she fumbled with the navigation computer, looking for a route to the safe blue of hyperspace, she cursed herself for another moment of weakness in a universe that had none. One day she'd learn. It's weird that she'll later run into Luke, whose weakness is the main reason she's still alive. If he'd been anything like Vader, or like her, she'd be sliced up into tiny little pieces.
Yeah. Also, I'm thinking of a few other people who would show no mercy to Aphra.
You can give a list. We don't have that much time left before the episode wraps up.
Well, if we are talking Sith Kyle Katarn, that would cause Aphra to end up in Tabion's position in Outcast, being force choked by a dark side Kyle Katarn.
I mean, ultimately he did spare her. When you said dark side Kyle Katarn, I thought it was like Mysteries of the Sith one, or like the Jedi Knight alternate ending.
Okay, yeah, those two would not spare Aphra. Also, let's see. Kip would just see Aphra as an Imperial. And yeah, that's another person.
Okay, so next one. Oh my, this one's gonna be weird. Okay.
A mouse droid. They're doing a mouse droid next. What's next? An astromech droid?
Oh, I'd be up for that, but the mouse droid isn't the issue. Okay, so I assume everyone's familiar with two characters by the name of Wilhuff Tarkin and TK421.
Oh, that.
It's hard to even put it into words. It's so bizarre. It's such a weird choice to make. To add that to the lore. I mean, I don't think it's completely out of character, but like I don't get it. I didn't get it. Oh my. Should we just leave the audience in suspense about the exact details until next time?
Yeah.
I mean, they'll probably build up the idea in their minds and be super disappointed when they reach it. Okay, so I guess you can also read the Dr. Aphra comics if you're curious, though good luck finding any. Comic book shops are a dying breed. Alright, bye.